Good morning. This is Advances in Abuse and Custody Evaluations Practice. Ken Lewis is going to be presenting virtually for us. Actually, he's got a recorded presentation. Dr. Lewis was an associate professor of social work. Now he is a full-time custody evaluator. He has been court appointed in 27 states, Canada, and Brazil. His publications include peer-reviewed articles on parental alienation, other custody-related topics, and a book, Child Custody Evaluations by Social Workers. He is on the editorial board of the Journal of Forensic Social Work, National Organization of Forensic Social Workers, and the Chronicle, which is the International Association of Family Judges and Magistrates.
Okay. Hello, my name is Ken Lewis. I'm the Director of Child Custody Evaluation Services. I'm located in Philadelphia, work all around the country. I sure wish I could be out there with you in Fort Collins, but we had a problem with the airlines and got canceled. So I'm going to read my presentation. I am a full-time custody evaluator, having been appointed in many states, Canada, and in other countries. Now, in short, I will first in this presentation identify what the PARQ is. It was copyrighted by Dr. Ronald Rovner, and it's a questionnaire for obtaining data about a child's perceptions of his or her parents or other significant caregivers. After that, I'll tell you how I use the PARQ in my child custody evaluations when parental alienation is alleged. And next, I'll tell you how I use the PARQ in assessing one of the best interest custody factors. So let's start. Section A. What is the PARQ? The PARQ is a set of 60 questions, each requiring a response of either almost always true, sometimes true, rarely true, or almost never true. Now, Dr. Rovner explained that back in 1960, the PARQ theory focused on how a child's perceptions of parental acceptance or rejection were related to the child's adjustment during his childhood, during his adolescence, and even later in life. Section B. Using the PARQ in child custody evaluations where parental alienation is alleged. Our president of the study group, William Burnett, defined a parentally alienated child as, quote, one whose parents are engaged in a high conflict separation or divorce, and who allies himself strongly with one parent, the alienating parent, and rejects a relationship with the other parent, the target parent, without legitimate justification, end quote. Now, Dr. Burnett noted that the PARQ theory and the parental alienation theory both address serious manifestations of healthy relationships and also maladaptive and pathological relationships. In looking at both these theories together, he concluded that the PAR questionnaire helps identify the psychological mechanism called splitting, and splitting frequently occurs in severely alienated children. Splitting in the picture. He surmised that the PARQ could be useful in diagnosing PA in both clinical and forensics settings. Following his lead, I have frequently been using it in my forensics evaluations. And I think that our next speaker, Dr. Alan Blatsky, will speak to the clinical settings. When administering the PARQ to a young child, I make it a game. I built a colorful set of boxes. Oops, wrong hand. I built a colorful set of boxes. And the boxes are identified as almost always true, sometimes true, rarely true, and almost never true. First, I go through a rehearsal with the young child, getting the child familiar with the four choices and how this game works. For example, I read from a slip of paper that says, quote, "The sun comes up in the morning," and I ask the young child to place the slip of paper in an appropriate box. The actual administration of the PARQ is either done at this after this rehearsal is done, or maybe in a later time during my custody evaluation. I slowly read out loud the PARQ 60 questions while observing the child's behavioral responses to each. Parentally alienated children will often show signs of disgust regarding the targeted parent. Body language, grunts, and factual expressions can be very suggestive to the questions I might want to ask later in an interview. When reading, I attempt to eliminate intonations. In linguistics, an intonation is a variation in pitch used to indicate the speaker's attitude and emotions, to signal the declarations of a personal point of view from the speaker. I try to avoid intonations. Scores at the extremes can provide important data for a custody evaluator who might discuss the 3 levels of parental alienation in a written report for the court. A very high PAR score, say between 210 and 240, may not necessarily be determinative of rejection caused by parental alienation. The cause may be something else. Also, a very low PARQ score, say between 20 and 80, may not necessarily be determinative of parental enmeshment. But such extreme scores should suggest to the evaluator the importance of an interview with the child focused on the child's explanations for some of these responses. For example, item number 4 in the questionnaire says, "does not really love me." If the child selects either almost always true or almost never true, then a follow-up interview question I might offer the child is, quote, "Can you tell me why you answered this way?" For another example, item 25 says, quote, "seems to dislike me." If the child selects either always or never, then a follow-up interview with the child might be something like this, quote, "Can you give me an example of this?" Sometimes the child's responses can be quite revealing, and under some circumstances and in some jurisdictions, they may be permitted as admissible hearsay. Of course, the data derived from a PARQ should be integrated with data from other sources before any opinion is proffered. Caution is warranted when a custody evaluator relies on a low PARQ score to support the child's preference for one parent. Parental alienation literature warns that the preference statement of a parentally alienated child might convey what Dr. Burnett has called a maladaptive or pathological relationship with the preferred parent. A family court in New York State understood this caution. The court wrote, quote, "Understandably, very little weight should be given to the child who expresses preference when the mother's alienating behavior influences the child." That was a 1916 case. Many courts, on the other hand, are conflicted regarding how they should respond to PA cases. The Vermont Supreme Court said, quote, "We need to be careful in how we define parental alienation and in administering a rule that a parent cannot benefit from alienating a child from the other parent." That's Spaulding versus Butler back in 2001. In addition to limiting weight on an alienated child's preference, some family courts have other measures for dealing with parental alienation. In Colorado, for example, the targeted parent can file a motion to restrict contact with the alienating parent when an expert alleges that parental alienation is causing emotional harm to the child. The motion reads, quote, "It shall be heard and ruled upon by the court not later than 14 days after the date of the filing of the motion. Any parenting time which occurs during the such 14-day period after the filing of such a motion shall be supervised by an unrelated third party deemed suitable by the court or by a licensed mental health professional." And that's a Colorado Revised Statute 14-10-129, Section 4, 2019. Over the years, family courts have experienced and continue to experience strange and unusual circumstances when it comes to parental alienation. For example, in one case I found, the father has I'm quoting, the father has alleged alienations of parental alienation since before the child was born. In a motion for temporary orders prior to the birth of the child's in a motion for contemporary orders prior to the son's birth, the father alleged that the mother had already begun the alienation of the child and the father's family before the child was born. That is a Colorado Supreme Court case, Marriage of Wolcott, 464 Pacific 3 at page 703. That's a 2020 case. While the PARQ can be a valuable tool for custody evaluators, they should be careful how they rely on the scores. While I know of no appellate court yet that has accepted or rejected the PARQ under either the Frye or the Daubert standards, I have had one Daubert hearing at the trial court level, and it was admitted by that judge. In that case, I administered the PARQ in connection with the 5-factor model, which we'll be hearing about at this convention. With these two resources, when these two resources work together, the forensic aspects of parental alienation can be enhanced, and the goals of therapeutic jurisprudence will be promoted. Section 3C. Using the PARQ to assess a best interest factor. The phrase the best interest of the child is an important phrase used in family law around the world. In November of 1989, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, called the CRC, since then, it has been ratified by 196 countries, with only one country, the United States, failing to ratify it. All countries that ratify the CRC are bound by international law to ensure that it is implemented. The phrase, quote, the best interest of the child, end quote, is found in the CRC at Article 3, in, quote, in all actions concerning children, the best interest of the child shall be a primary consideration, end quote. In the United States, all of our states have either statutory custody factors or case law derivatives for their courts to determine the best interest of a child. Some states have as many as 20 statutory factors, such as Florida. Others have as few as 7, that would be Idaho. Colorado has 9 custody factors. While a child's score on the PARQ can be useful data for supporting the evaluator's opinion regarding the preference custody factor, these scores can also be useful for assessing another custody factor called the parent-child interaction factor. Colorado custody factor number 3 says, quote, the interaction and interrelationship of the child with his or her parents, end quote. Now these exact words are found in 21 jurisdictions in the United States. And if you want to know if this factor is in your state, email me. The states I found were Delaware, District of Columbia, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Dakota, Ohio, Vermont, and Wyoming. And interestingly, I found similar words in the custody factors in Spain and in Germany. When I conduct the custody evaluation in a state with the parent-child interaction factor, the PARQ is a useful instrument, especially when the case involves young siblings. I have found that judges often appear to be very interested in the children's scores. On a chart like this. I don't know if you see that. Number 4. How I use the PARQ with 2 siblings at the same time. If I have 2 siblings in a case, I can administer the PARQ to both of them simultaneously, which saves a lot of time of testing them separately. But since my time is limited here in this presentation, I can only tell you that I placed them back to back on the floor so they can't see each other's answers. Now for a conclusion. When parental alienation has been alleged, in my cases, I have found that along with other data, the PARQ has been a valuable instrument for providing the court with empirical data to support my opinion regarding the allegation and the custody factor called preference. It has also been valuable for providing data on other custody factors. Now, I do welcome receiving from anyone out there who uses the PARQ, any custody evaluator. Please contact me and let me know if you use it. My name is Ken Lewis. I thank you for your time. And is this my address? No. Oh, my email address is drkenlewis. I'm at SNP. S for Sam, N for Nancy, I for Internet, P for Paul. SNP, like the scissors. SNP.net, N-E-T. And I have to turn this off somehow. On the red button. Turn it off. I'm not good at this.